Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskritya Naram chaiva narottama Devim sarasvatim vyasam Tato jaya mudiraye Nashtapraye svabhadrishu Nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavati uttama shloke Bhaktir bhavati naistiki Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam Dvaipayana virahakatara juhava Putreti tan mayatayo taravo binidus Tam sarva bhuta hridayam munimanatosmi. So, Hare Krishna, we are continuing this series of lectures on the structural review of the topics of Srimad Bhagavatam, where we are describing the logical structure of Srimad Bhagavatam or topical structure of Srimad Bhagavatam. How the flow of the narration of Srimad Bhagavatam goes to ultimately bring us to the lotus feet of the Lord. Srimad Bhagavatam can be compared with a very powerful river, the river Ganga, which has very fast and very strong current. And if we enter the waters of Ganga and surrender to the flow of river Ganga, ultimately she will bring us to the ocean. I don't know what will be left of us when we are there in the ocean. But the idea is that the whole flow of Srimad Bhagavatam, the whole narration of Srimad Bhagavatam is automatically bringing us to the lotus feet of the Lord, which to His beautiful personality, which is described in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And it definitely doesn't matter whether we structurally or logically understand how Srimad Bhagavatam works or not, because this is the flow. It's spontaneous. It will work anyway. If we read Srimad Bhagavatam, thank you, Hare Krishna. If we read Srimad Bhagavatam spontaneously, it will do the needful with our heart. It will purify the heart, give us certain understanding. But if we understand how this structure works and how it is, the whole narration is structured, then it's better. We will be able to more comprehensively understand the whole book of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we have been describing first preliminary studies, 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam, and then canto by canto, how it goes. And now we're on the 8th canto, and I will try to do the topical review of the 8th canto. And the 8th canto, according to the Krama theory, Krama theory is the theory which ascribes each of the 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam to each canto. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur definitely follows this Krama theory in his explanation of Srimad Bhagavatam, where the first 2 cantos is just an introduction to the whole book, and starting from the 3rd canto, Sarga, Visarga is the 4th canto, Sthanam is the 5th canto, Porshanam is the 6th canto, Uti is the 7th canto, and Manvantara is the topic of the 8th canto. And Shukadeva Goswami himself explains that what is Manvantara, what is the topic, why this topic is so important. He says Manvantara means the description of Sad-dharma or eternal duties of the humankind. manvantara, or rules of a certain manus, they establish the laws of nature, the laws of which humankind should follow. And Manvantara, the Manvantara avatar of the Lord, is being pleased, and he is coming to receive the fruits of the activities of human being. So he says Sad-dharma. So the topic of the 8th canto is Manvantara or Sad-dharma. What is Sad-dharma? As opposed to Asad-dharma. Dharma is a very, famous word, and, there is a lot of things which is Dharma, Manava Dharma, this Dharma, that Dharma, serve the humanity. It's all good, but it is not necessarily Sad-dharma or eternal duties. What is the eternal duties? As opposed to Asad-dharma or temporary duties, which we also have to do. Duties to our family, duties to the nation, duties to humanity. This is all fine. But what is the essence? What is the foundation without which all other dharmas become useless, futile? All other dharmas are good only if they have strong foundation in Sad-dharma, in something which is eternal or not changeable. So what is this Sad-dharma? And as we will see, all the stories of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam very clearly show that the Sad-dharma, upon which is the foundation for any activity which we do in this world. Any activities which we do in this world will be fruitful, useful, and beneficial to us and to other living beings. Only if the foundation is there, and the foundation is Sad-dharma, and Sad-dharma is the surrender to the Lord. So the topic of the 8th canto is the complete science of surrender to the Lord. What does it mean to surrender to the Lord? What does it imply? How we should surrender? What should be our motivation when we surrender to the Lord? And what we should try to avoid while thinking that we're surrendering to the Lord. Because oftentimes there is a self-deception. We're deceiving ourselves. We think, I'm a devotee, I'm surrendered soul. But at the same time, we maintain the same sort of attitude, changing externally, the dress and tilak and everything else. Like Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, Shadvimam tvam, Shishyasteham Shadvimam tvam prapanam, I'm the soul surrendered unto you. Nayotsya iti Govinda, but I'm not going to fight. So that's the position of all of us. I'm surrendered soul, but don't ask me what I don't want to do. So this is very important topics of the 8th canto, different aspects of surrender. And it's a science. It's a science of surrender, how to surrender to the Lord, and how beautiful it is, how joyful it is to surrender to the Lord if we do it properly. And basically what is described in gist in this 8th canto, the 5 types of surrender is described here in the 8th canto. 5 different types of surrender with different according results. And also the 6 types of surrender is also described. Sharanapati Lakshana, Anukulyasya Sankalpah, Pratikulyasya Varjanam, Rakshishyatiti Vishvasogoptritve Varanam Tatha. This Shadvidha Sharanagati is also described here in different stories, in the form of stories, to drive this topic home to our heart and to explain it to us. Shukadev Goswami is describing different stories of surrender. So first, when we study the science of surrender, first of all, we should understand who is worthy to surrender. Because surrender we cannot avoid in this material world. We always surrender to somebody. The problem is that we always surrender to somebody who is not worthy of being surrendered to. We always make a mistake. So many people surrender, during the Second World War, the whole German nation surrendered to Hitler, and result was very bad. And, many people surrendered to Donald Trump. Somebody surrendered to somebody else. In this material world, surrender is the most common thing. Everyone has to surrender because we are incomplete. The reason why we have to surrender is because we are incomplete, and we all desire to be complete. And for this completeness, we need to surrender to somebody who is more complete than us, who can complement our incompleteness, so to speak. Therefore, the very first important topic which we have to understand when we study the science of surrender is that who is worthy to be surrendered to. And for that, I will read verse and purport from the first chapter of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada, where the general description of surrender, the qualification of somebody who should be surrendered to, who we should surrender to, is beautifully described. So that's the 16th verse of the first chapter of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is entitled the Manus, Administrators of the Universe. Tam īhamānaṁ nirahaṅkṛtam budham, nirāśiṣaṁ pūrṇam ananya-coditam, śikṣayantam nija-vartma-saṁsthitaṁ, prabhum prapadye khila-dharma-bhāvanam. Very beautiful and very instructive verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Tam, under the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, īhamānaṁ, who is acting for our benefit, nirahaṅkṛtam, who is without entanglement or desire for gain, budham, who is completely in knowledge, nirāśiṣaṁ, without desires to enjoy the fruits of his activities, pūrṇam, who is full and therefore has no need to fulfill desires, ananya, by others, coditam, induced or inspired, nrin, all of human society, śikṣayantam, to teach the real path of life, nija-vartma, his own personal way of life, saṁsthitam, to establish without deviation, prabhum, unto the Supreme Lord, prapadye, I request everyone to surrender. Akhila-dharma-bhāvanam, who is the master of all religious principles or the occupational duties for human being. So this is the verse spoken by Swayambhuva Manu. The first chapter of this canto very beautifully describes this process of surrender. Swayambhuva Manu is performing austerities, and while performing austerities, standing on one leg to please the Lord, he is chanting the verses, which are the verses from Ishopanishad. At least the first verse, the second verse of these verses is very much similar to Ishavasyam edam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagatena tyaktena bunjita magrida kasya svidanam. And he's explaining the science of surrender in these verses, in these prayers. And this is last of his prayers, the last of his prayers, where he explains who we should surrender to. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, works just an ordinary human being, yet he does not desire to enjoy the fruits of work. He is full in knowledge, free from material desires and diversions, and completely independent. As the Supreme Teacher of human society, he teaches his own way of activities, and thus he inaugurates the real path of religion. So this is the Sad-dharma. Very clearly, Swayambhuva Manu says, Krishna himself inaugurates Sad-dharma, and this Sad-dharma is surrender to him. I request everyone to follow him, to surrender unto him. Prabhum prapadye, akhila-dharma-bhāvanam. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It's a long purport, but very nice. This is the sum and substance of our Krishna consciousness movement. We are simply requesting human society to follow in the footsteps of the teacher of Bhagavad Gita. Follow the instructions of Bhagavad Gita as it is, and your life will be successful. That is the summary of the Krishna consciousness movement. The organizer of the Krishna consciousness movement is teaching everyone how to follow Lord Ramachandra, how to follow Lord Krishna, how to follow Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In this material world, we need a leader for a monarchy or good government. Lord Ramachandra, by his practical example, showed how to live for the benefit of all human society. He fought with the demons like Ravana, he carried out the orders of his father, and he remained the faithful husband of Mother Sita. Thus, there is no comparison to Lord Ramachandra's acting as an ideal king. Indeed, people still hanker for Ramarajya, a government conducted like that of Lord Ramachandra. Similarly, although Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he taught his disciple and devotee Arjuna how to lead life, ending in going back home, back to Godhead. Tyaktva deham punarjanmana iti mameti sorjuna. All teachings, political, economical, social, religious, cultural, and philosophical, are to be found in Bhagavad Gita. One only has to follow them strictly. The Supreme Personality of Godhead also comes as Lord Chaitanya just to play the part of a pure devotee. Thus, the Lord teaches us in different ways just to make our life successful. And Swayambhuva Manu requests us to follow him. Swayambhuva Manu is the leader of mankind. He has given a book called Manu Samhita to guide human society. Herein, he directs us to follow the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his different incarnations. These incarnations are described in Vedic literature, and Jayadev Goswami has described 10 important incarnations in summary. Keshavadrita Meena Sharira Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Keshavadrita Buddha Sharira Jaya Jagadisha Hare, etc. Swayambhuva Manu instructs us to follow the instructions of God's incarnations, especially Krishna's instructions of Bhagavad Gita as it is. Appreciating Bhakti Marga as instructed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya thus depicted the activities of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu: Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga, śikṣayantam ekah purushah purānaha, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Sharira Dhari Kripam Budhir Yastvamaham Prapadye. Let me take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, who has descended in the form of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to teach us real knowledge. His devotional service and detachment from whatever does not foster Krishna consciousness. He has descended because he is an ocean of transcendental mercy. Let me surrender unto his lotus feet. In this age of Kali, people cannot follow the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore Lord himself takes the part of Sri Krishna Chaitanya to teach personally how to become Krishna conscious. He asks everyone to follow him and become a guru to deliver the fallen souls of Kali Yuga. Yari deka tarikaha Krishna Upadesh, Amara Gyai Guru Hoy, Hana Tara Eidesh. Instruct everyone to follow the orders of Lord Shri Krishna as they given in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. In this way, become a spiritual master and try to liberate everyone in this land. The coherent purpose of Lord Ramachandra, Lord Krishna, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is to teach human society how to be happy by following the instructions of the Supreme Lord. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Yantah pravishya mama vachi mamam prasuptam sanjivayata kila shakti daraksvanamna anyamsya hasta charana shravana tvagadim pranannamo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam. Svasyastu vishwasya kalah prasidatam dayantu bhutani shivam mithodiyam anascha badram bhajata tadoksaje aveshyatam no matir adhyahaitu ki. So, Srila Prabhupada explains the essence of all teachings of Vedic literature is just to surrender to Lord and follow Him. Sarva-dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papibhyo mokshashyami ma shuchaha. It's interesting that sometimes people don't even understand this. I spoke once with Indian ambassador to Russia. He was a very nice person, very, very friendly, follower of Mahatma Gandhi. And once we started talking with him about Bhagavad Gita, and he said that actually, this... no, he's not actually a follower of Mahatma Gandhi. On the contrary, he was against Gandhi's interpretation of Bhagavad Gita. He said, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna teaches us to fight for the country. How Mahatma Gandhi can interpret it that it should be non-violent things, we should be Deshi Bhaktas, we should fight for our country. I said, no, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna teaches us to surrender to Him. He said, really? I said, yes. He said, where did he say this? I said, Sarva-dharman parityajya. He said, really? He said this? You're not joking? So... people miss the point because we interpret anything we read according to our samskaras, according to our understanding, and we miss very important points sometimes. But Srila Prabhupada stresses this again and again and again. In Ramayana, the same point is stressed. Lord Ramachandra says to even Ravana through Angada, he said, you surrender unto me and I will, you will rule happily this Lanka and everything will be fine. And when Vibhishana surrenders, he says that this is my sacred duty, sakriteva prapannayah, tavasmiti sayachate, abhayam sarvada tasmai. I will make him completely abhay, completely fearless. This is mama vrata. This is my vow. If somebody surrenders unto him, I will protect him. And of course, Srila Prabhupada says that Lord Chaitanya ultimately says the same thing. Surrender means follow me, follow what I said, and you will be saved. You want to be saved? Here is, what you should follow. Lord Ramachandra is there, Lord Krishna is there, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is there. Follow what they say, everything will be fine. But very interesting and important point here is that Manu explains why we should surrender to the Lord. Why? Why we should surrender. And if we are to surrender to somebody else, we should see in him reflection of the same qualities. And these qualities of the Lord, which makes him worthy of surrender, of taking shelter of, is īhamānaṁ, īhamānam. īhamānam means he is detached. He is not selfish. All these qualities is actually describing the Lord as somebody who doesn't have any particular self-interest. When we surrender to somebody who has selfish interest, we will fail. We will be frustrated in our surrender. So many people lost faith in Krishna consciousness because they applied their surrender to not exactly to the worthy persons. It's a very sensitive process. We have to be very clear, and because it is a science, Swayambhuva says it very clearly. īhamānaṁ. īhamānaṁ means he is not into himself, he is detached, he is not attached. nirahaṅkṛtam. He doesn't have ahankar. He doesn't have false ego. He is not self-centered. Budham. Budham, Srila Jiva Goswami very beautifully explains what budham means. He says budham means he is conscious of his own bliss. In other words, he is blissful himself. He is not somebody who is lacking of something. When people, there are so many people who say, surrender unto me. Surrender unto me. Any political leader says this, surrender unto me. Just follow me. And I will make you happy. But they cannot do because they're not happy themselves. First of all, you have to see if this person is happy. If he is not satisfied, if he is trying to acquire more and more material possessions and everything else, then he is not worthy of surrender. And Swayambhuva says he's budham. Budham, the Lord, budham means he is conscious of his own bliss. He is blissful. He's not in need of anything else. Nirāśiṣaṁ, he doesn't have any desire. Pūrṇam, he is full. He is complete. He doesn't lack anything. The problem becomes, we can surrender to a human being, but only if he is surrendered to the Lord. And in this way, he is not lacking of anything. He is happy. Srila Prabhupada was like this. He was happy when he was living in Radha Damodar temple in a very humble way. He was happy when he was living in the palaces. And there was no change in his mood. He was not lacking of anything. And therefore, it is said here, pūrṇam, ananya-coditam. He's not induced by somebody else. Ananya-coditam. It's not that, I'm afraid that somebody is doing something to me. It's just self-inspiration. The inspiration, coditam, ananya-coditam, is coming from within. Not because somebody else is telling me, do this, do that. No. The Lord or a pure devotee, he's ananya-coditam. He is not impelled for the action by somebody else. And he's doing this śikṣayantam, nija-vartma-saṁsthitaṁ. He is doing it only to teach. Whatever he does to teach us. He shows the example. He is doing it not because he has some selfish interest or something to gain from his activities, but he is just showing the example to teach for our benefit. So this selflessness is the main characteristic of somebody who should be surrendered. So that's the first teaching of the 8th canto. Whom we should surrender. We should only surrender to somebody who is complete and selfless and doesn't have ahankar and doesn't have any even tinge of self-interest. Because if the tinge of self-interest will be there, we will be frustrated. And our surrender will be futile, will be wasted. Ultimately, will not bring the proper benefit. So that's the first very important teaching. And in general, this whole first chapter of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam shows that if you surrender to the Lord, to the proper source of everything, that He will protect you in all regards. Swayambhuva is not trying to protect himself. Demons are rushing into him, trying to devour him from all sides. And he's just standing there, Ishavasyam idam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat. And he's praying to the Lord, and Lord himself takes the incarnation to protect him. So this first chapter of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam also shows very important two principles of surrender, two first principles of surrender. Anukulyasya sankalpah pratikulyasya varjanam. We know what are the 6 elements, 6 angas of surrender. First 2 angas of surrender. Anukulyasya sankalpah, you accept everything which is favorable, you reject everything which is unfavorable. And this is formulated by Swayambhuva Manu in his prayers. In this verse, Atmavasyam idam jagat, yat kinchit idam vishvam, yat kinchit jagatyam jagat, tena tyaktena bunjitaha magrida kasyasvidanam. That's the principle. Srila Prabhupada says this. What is anukulyasya sankalpah pratikulyasya varjanam? Take only that things which you really need. Don't take anything extra. Why the world is suffering so much nowadays? Why there is a distraction everywhere? Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that one of the reasons of distraction of the world is that people waste many things which they don't need. So much waste is going on because people are trying to get excess of what they're not supposed to take, and therefore all these calamities are there. Coronavirus is about this. All these pandemics and wars and famines and everything else is just because people are not conscientious in their spending. You know, it's amazing how wasteful the modern civilization is. So much waste, so much luxury, so much excess. People are just trying to get everything. So this is 2 first principles of surrender. Reject whatever you don't need. It's not yours. Don't develop the thief's mentality. I need more. I need more. You know, you will die anyway. So there's no need to get more than you need. You only need this much. Don't waste whatever is there. Prabhupada, there is a beautiful story about him. He was always teaching his disciples. You know, he was very angry when he would see that the tap, the water is dripping somewhere. And was once the last days he was in Vrindavan and he was going around the temple with the huge crowd of devotees. And then all of a sudden, he stopped. And the whole crowd behind him also stopped. Somebody just rushed into him and, you know, and they didn't know. And he says, he asked his disciples, did you see? Do you see? He's just looking around, you know, maybe Krishna is there. Or what's going on? Or Narada Muni came. And then Prabhupada says, you're blind, and I can see. And then he goes again, and he makes the second round around the temple, and he stops at exactly the same place, and he says, do you see? And again, everyone is looking, and nobody can see anything. And then Prabhupada points out, there is a lamp there. It's a daylight, and the lamp is burning. He said, you're blind, and only I can see. So we are blind. We are blind. We don't see how we are actually encroaching to something which doesn't belong to us. We should be very conscientious in this regard. Very, very conscientious. And that's basically the first rule of surrender. Anukulyasya sankalpah pratikulyasya varjanam. And again, this first chapter of the 8th canto is the first, like, general surrender. It's not a surrender for specific need, and it doesn't describe surrender very vividly. But the very next chapter, when the story of Gajendra, the elephant, is being described, is of course a very vivid description of surrender. That's a famous story of Srimad Bhagavatam, Gajendra Mokshana, Leela, and the prayers of Gajendra. And of course, Gajendra exemplifies somebody who surrenders because he is suffering, because he is in this precarious condition of material life. So Gajendra being devoured by the crocodile. And it is specifically said by Shukadeva Goswami that Gajendra is being devoured by the crocodile of time. And if you think that Gajendra is just a nice story about some foolish elephant who was somewhere near Trikuta mountain, you're mistaken, because Gajendra is you. And you are devoured by the crocodile of time. The crocodile of time is, is joining his jaws and your leg and trying to devour you. So, and this is the time. The time is the cause of suffering. Why we suffer in this world? Because of time. The time comes and the suffering comes, the disease comes, the problems comes, tribulations comes, so many different things comes, and ultimately all these anxieties which are caused by the time, they waste our life. And the only solution to all the problems in our life is to surrender to God. And this is what we have to understand. But it's very interestingly described in Srimad Bhagavatam. In the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is specifically said that it took a long time for Gajendra to understand that he has to surrender to the Lord. Does it sound familiar to you? We suffer and suffer and suffer and suffer and suffer and suffer. And then, it dawns to us, maybe I should surrender to the Lord. Maybe this is the solution. But before that, what he was trying to do? He was trying to do exactly the same thing which we are trying to do. He tried to find another solution to all his sufferings. He thought, I am powerful. Look at me, I am such a big elephant. And this little crocodile, what he can do to me? And crocodile said, let's see what I can do to you. But he is pulling and pulling and pulling. And in the same way, we are struggling, we are fighting. But the teaching of Srimad Bhagavatam is that the sooner we understand this, the less blood will be shed from from everything which we have. Because otherwise we're just suffering uselessly. And it's very interesting because Srila Jiva Goswami again in Bhakti Sandarbha, he describes the signs of surrender, and he says the most important condition of surrender is called in Sanskrit ananya-coditam. Ananya-coditam means this mentality or this consciousness is that I don't have any other shelter, any other gati, any other shelter than the Lord. Unless you're pushed in the corner, you will not surrender. If you still think that there is some other upaya, my dear Jyotisha, give me some ruby or whatever, some upaya, this upaya or that upaya. People always trying to find some upaya. So when you, some means to save themselves, when you have this mentality, when you ultimately come to this conclusion, ananya-coditam, there is no other upaya, there is no other way, there is no other way, then only you surrender. So that's the mentality, and that's why surrender takes time. It really takes time before we really understand, before we exhaust all other possibilities of saving ourselves. And therefore it is said, it's beautiful in the before Gajendra starts his praying, before he remembers even the prayers. It's interesting, it's also a very interesting element of this whole dynamic of surrender. It's very difficult for us to surrender when everything is fine with us. Everything is fine, yeah, right, very good. It's very difficult for us to pray to the Lord sincerely. We come to Him, yes, right. Very good. Hare Krishna. How are you? So, but the prayer comes from the heart naturally when we feel that yes, right, Hare Krishna. I have to take shelter of you. You're really my protection. Then the prayer comes. Before that, the prayer will not come. And therefore, it's interestingly, very interestingly, Shukadeva Goswami says how Gajendra sings before he starts praying. He says, Namami me gyataya aturam gajah, kutah karinyah, prabhavanti mochitum, grahena pashena vidhatur avrito, pyaham chatam yami param parayanam. The other elephants, who are my friends and relatives, could not rescue me from this danger. What then to speak of my wives? They cannot do anything. It is by the will of providence that I have been attacked by this crocodile, and therefore I shall seek shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always the shelter of everyone, even the great personalities. So that's the conclusion which we have to come to surrender. Nobody else will save me. My wife will not save me. Narendra Modi will not save me. So many powerful people are there, but they themselves need to take shelter of the Lord. You know, don't try to find some other shelter. The Lord is the shelter. Take shelter of Him. Your friends will not save you. Nobody save you. Nobody will save you. And then he says, very interestingly, and that's the impetus of surrender. Why the surrender is there. And as I said, it's a conditional surrender. This surrender is because one is suffering. And this is not the best way of surrender. This is not the first class of surrender, but it's better than nothing. So in the next verse, he says, very interestingly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is certainly not known to everyone, but He is very powerful and influential. Therefore, although the serpent of eternal time, which is fearful in force, endlessly chases everyone, ready to swallow him, if one who fears this serpent seeks shelter of the Lord gives him protection, for even death runs away in fear of the Lord. I therefore surrender unto Him the great and powerful Supreme Authority, who is the actual shelter of everyone. So that's basically the motivation. If you're afraid of suffering, the fear is the motivation. Why do we surrender to the Lord? And you know, in Kali Yuga, it's most common. It's actually said that there's 4 categories of people who surrender to the Lord, of pious people who surrender to the Lord, arto jigyasur artarthi gyanicha bharatar shaba. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna describes these 4 categories of pious people. Sukritina jana. This sukriti, when people acquired some sukriti, it's also very interesting. Because 8th canto is describing surrender. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, why people surrender? Because they have some pious credits, some sukriti. And the previous canto, 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, was describing how to acquire pious credits. That by association with saintly people and by following strictly the rules and regulations of Varnashrama, you acquire necessary sukriti which will help you to surrender when the need will be there. So that's, again, very important logical structure or logical flow of the narration of Srimad Bhagavatam. So the 8th canto is describing how different people surrender, and it is described by some acharyas that these 4 categories of surrender, of people who surrender to the Lord, of pious people who surrender to the Lord, this motivation is according to the Varnas. Shudras, they surrender only because they suffer. There is no other way for them to surrender. Vaishyas, why do surrender? They surrender because they want money. Arto jigyasu artarthi. They want artha-arthi. They want money. Kshatriyas, why do surrender? Jigyasu. They're curious. They're challenging. Let me see. And then Brahmanas, they surrender because they're jnani, they have knowledge, because this is the motivation. So because in Kali Yuga, everyone is Shudra, why people surrender to the Lord? There's only one reason. Because they suffer. There's no other reason. There is no other motivation. Because Kalau Shudra Sambhava, in the age of Kali, the main motivation, why did we come to Krishna consciousness? Because we suffer. And because we want to avoid sufferings. That's why we surrender. So therefore, this Gajendra Mokshana Leela, even though it's not the best way to surrender to the Lord, still it's very instructive and very relevant to us. And therefore, this 8th canto starts with this Gajendra Mokshana Leela, which explains to us the dynamic of surrender because of our fear of death. And Prabhupada, of course, he quotes Taittiriya Upanishad, the famous verse from Taittiriya Upanishad, which said that the wind is flowing because of the fear of God, and the sun is only shining because of the fear, and Chandra, the moon, is shining because of the fear of the Lord, and Agni also emanates the heat and light because of the fear. And from the Lord, even Mrityu davati panchamaha. Because of the fear of the Lord, the death runs away. So the idea of this beautiful verse from Taittiriya Upanishad is that everything is working because the Lord is in control, but if you want to be protected from death, you should surrender to Him, because death personified runs away from the Lord in fear. Everyone is fearful of death, but death is fearful of the Lord. So we will skip Gajendra prayers of surrender, and we will come directly to the next story. Very important story, yeah. Very important story of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Of the Gajendra prayers of surrender, the story of the churning of the milk ocean is there. And of course, this story shows what kind of surrender, what is the motivation for this surrender? Huh? Yeah, artha-arthi, somebody who wants wealth, somebody who wants the Lord to maintain himself, and therefore he surrenders to the Lord. And demigods who are praying to the Lord, and of course, yes, as we said that first two angas of surrender, anukulyasya sankalpah pratikulyasya varjanam, are there in the first chapter of the 8th canto in the prayers of Swayambhuva Manu. And then Rakshishyatiti Vishwaso, this trust that the Lord will protect me, is depicted in this Gajendra story. Gajendra realized that the Lord will protect me for sure. So that's the next element. And then Goptritve Varanam Tatha, the next element of surrender, that the Lord is my maintainer, is exemplified by the demigods who come to the Lord and say, my dear Lord, Hare Krishna, we need something. Please give us what we need. You're maintaining everyone. Please give us back all these heavenly planets. So that's a long story, and but it also has very important lessons of surrender. Again, as I said, this whole 8th canto is teaching us how to surrender, why to surrender, what is the dynamic of surrender. And the next motivation for surrender is very common motivation for surrender is that you go to the Lord and you say, my dear Lord, I need some money. Come on, Hare Krishna. So, I need it. I really need it. Please give me something. Dehi, this dehi, that dehi. Give me something. And this whole story very interestingly describes that the Lord gives. But He gives in such a way not to make you lazy, not to make you irresponsible, not to make you, oh, it works, I don't have to work anymore. I have to go to the Lord and just put some 5 rupees into hundi and then we'll get big interest from my investment. No, it doesn't work like this. It's very clearly said here, yes, Krishna will give you, but how He will give you? He will tell you, go and work. The demigods, they come to the Lord and they say so many good prayers and they say, please, please, we surrender to you, please give us, give us. Lord says, yes. Go to the demons, make truce with them, work hard, work to your sweat and, till your blood is coming out, oozing from your ears. Do work very hard. And he specifically said, it's very interesting, the instruction of the Lord to the demigods. If you want that the Lord will fulfill your material desires, He will fulfill your material desires. You go to Him, you pray to Him, He will. But it doesn't imply that you don't have to do anything. You have to work hard. That's the first thing. The second thing, you have to be very patient. The Lord Himself says, I will fulfill your desires. I will give you money, but not immediately, not so soon. You have to really, with patience and diligence, work, apply your intelligence, serve, and work hard. And we know that demigods, they really work hard. They were fainting and they were dying basically. While they were carrying this Vasuki, the serpent, it was so heavy. And not only they were carrying this Vasuki, the serpent was emanating, was burping with fire, and it was very hot, especially when they started churning. It was a difficult task. And then this mountain, Mandara mountain, they had to carry this Mandara mountain to the whole thing. It shows actually that if you want money from the Lord, He will give to you, but first you have to work really hard, really hard. Very patiently, with a lot of diligence, you have to do. And He says also, you have to give up 3 things. You have to give up greed. He will give to you, but you have to be very generous. If you want to achieve some benefits from the Lord, you have to be generous. You have to share whatever you get with others. You have to donate. You have to give up your greed. The Lord doesn't give money to greedy people because, He says, what is the use to give money to greedy people? It will be just a waste of money. They will just sit on this money without using it properly. So you have to give up your greed. You have to give up your anger, because sometimes when we work, we become really irritated, agitated. This is another thing. And what else was there? No, not lust. It was something else. Just 1 second. Your greed, your... Patient, yes. Patient, I already said. You have to be patient. You have to give up your greed, your anger, and your... before. Yes. Fear, yes. You have to give up your fear. You have to be you have to be fearless. You have to work also with a lot of conviction, with a lot of that. Ultimately, the Lord will protect me. The Lord will give. This is how it is. The life is difficult. The Lord is teaching us very important lesson that the life is not easy. Don't expect that you will have easy life. You know, I'm a devotee, Hare Krishna, so I don't need to do anything. You have to be very bold in your aspirations. You have to work hard, and you have to give up your anger, because sometimes it will not be the way you want. It's not going to be always the way you want, even if you are a devotee, believe it or not. You know? So you have to give up all these bad qualities and work diligently, and ultimately you will get what you require. The main thing is, of course, you have to be surrendered to the Lord. And and we all know that after working hard and churning this milk ocean, the poison first came. And after poison, the poison was drank by Lord Shiva, and after poison, so many good things came. And only at the very end, the nectar of immortality came. And the demons, they immediately rushed to get this nectar of immortality. They were rushing, and they started quarreling with each other. It's a very interesting point, because when people in this material world are working hard, they have this competitive spirit, this mentality, aham purvam. The demons were rushing, and they were saying, I'm the first, I am the most worthy of getting this nectar. And the Lord doesn't like it. This competitive spirit is something which, in the eyes of the Lord, is not something valuable. So we have to work very diligently, but we don't need to develop this mentality, I'm the first one, because those who have this mentality, they will have an illusion that they will get their results, but ultimately they will be deprived of it. They will get, for a short while, they will have this illusion, yes, I got the nectar, I got what I need, but they will be deprived. Only those who are very humble, like demigods in this story, when Dhanvantari came with the pot of nectar, and the demons snatched away. Here's the God himself. He's carrying the pot of nectar. They cannot care less about the Lord. They just snatch the pot from his hands and run away and say, I am the first, and start quarreling with each other. They will not get anything. And the demigods, they were sitting, they were standing there looking what's going on. Will we get anything? And they did. They did get everything, because the Lord, he doesn't like this greedy attitude. You have to give up your greed. You have to give up your anger. You have to give up your competitive spirit, and you have to follow the Lord. The Lord says, do this, you will be successful. No problem. You will be successful. You need it, you will get it. If you want some, high position, whatever money, you will get it. No problem. Just surrender unto me. And therefore, while describing or finishing this story, how the Lord incarnates as Mahini Murti, we know that the Lord came as a Mahini Murti, and he says, oh, my dear demons, I will choose, and I will distribute this nectar to you. Give this pot to me. I will be the judge. Don't worry about this. And demon says, yes. You're the best. Take it. And she says, do you really believe me? How you can believe some loose woman who is just wandering here without any protection? And he says, no, we believe you. Anyway, Mahini Murti, he or she, I don't know. she bewilders demons and snatches all the nectar and ultimately distributes all the nectar to demigods and deprives demons from it. But a very instructive and important lesson at the end of this story, in the 9th chapter of the 8th canto, 28th verse, it is said, the place, the time, the cause, the purpose, the activity, and the ambition were all the same for both the demigods and the demons. But the demigods achieve one result and the demons achieve another. Because the demigods are always under the shelter of the dust of the Lord's lotus feet, they could very easily drink the nectar and get its results. The demons, however, not having sought shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, were unable to achieve the result they desired. Again, the same point, very important point, is that if you want to achieve a result, you should take shelter of the Lord. The lotus feet of the Lord ultimately give the result. It is the Lord who gives the result. You may apply the same endeavor, the same time, the same place. Everything was the same. But the demons didn't get anything. And demigods got everything. Why? Because internally they were surrendered to the Lord. It's important to keep this mentality. I'm surrendered to the Lord. And therefore I'm not angry, whether I get it or not. Ultimately, I'm ready to receive any results He wants me to give. He wants to give to me. That's the main point, is that this mentality that I'm surrendered and I'm working hard and ultimately I'm ready to receive any results is the key for success. That's actually the whole management course, which is given here in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. How you should manage your affairs to ultimately be successful beyond your expectations. Your success will supersede your expectations if you do everything properly according to the desires of the Lord and according to His instructions. So now we have, we covered in this 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we covered 2 motivations, arto jigyasu not, arto and artarthi. We covered 4 elements of surrender. Anukulyasya sankalpah pratikulyasya varjanam rakshishyatiti vishvaso goptritve varanam tatha. So these 4 things are described in these stories. And now we come to a very peculiar and amazing and even hilarious story about Lord Shiva. After this whole story of Lord Shiva was, after drinking poison, he probably, got, he was a little sick. Therefore, he was not present during the Mahini Murti. He went home for his recovery. Drinking this hala poison was difficult. So he was not present while Mahini Murti was there. Therefore, he approached the Lord and he said, "My dear Lord, I heard that you came as a beautiful woman. I really want to see you in this form." And the Lord looked at him and said, "Do you really want to see me in this form or not? Are you sure?" So that's a very interesting story. And why this story is there? Because actually it exemplifies the 3rd motivation for surrender, inquisitiveness. Lord Shiva was very curious. What is going to happen? As I said, this inquisitiveness, jigyasu, as a motivation for surrender, it's a motivation of very strong people, strong-willed people, kshatriyas. It's the motivation for kshatriyas. And kshatriyas, they're very, they like challenges. And they have this inquisitiveness, and they have very strong will. So Lord Shiva is actually displaying this attitude. My dear Lord, I heard that you're very powerful. Can you show me your power? And let's see whether you are really that powerful or not. So basically that's the motivation behind this request, this very strange request of Lord Shiva otherwise. But he actually wants the Lord to prove that he is superior to him. He wants to be defeated by the Lord. But he wants the Lord to show the maximum extent of his power. So in somewhat challenging spirit, not in a wrong way, not in a bad way, but with little challenge in his mind, he says, let me experience the full extent of your power. And that's sometimes what people do when they surrender to the Lord. They know the Lord is there, but they're really not 100% sure how powerful he is. They want to really test his powers or whatever, and sometimes they do some strange things. It's a wrong motivation. Ultimately, Srimad Bhagavatam wants to say that this is not the best motivation. Even though the great Lord Shiva is doing this, still it's not the best motivation, and therefore it's very interestingly depicted there. Again, just 1 second. First, Lord Shiva, when he's praying to the Lord, and he's asking the Lord, please show me this form of Mahini Murti, before asking the Lord to show this form of Mahini Murti, he says in the 11th verse of the 12th chapter of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, my Lord, you are the supreme knowledge personified. You know everything about this creation and its beginning, maintenance, and annihilation. And you know all the endeavors made by the living entities by which they either implicated in this material world or liberated from it. As the air enters the vast sky and also enters the bodies of all moving and non-moving entities, you are present everywhere, and therefore you are the knower of all. Basically, that's the expression of his inquisitiveness. He says, Lord, you are knowing everything. And in the next verse, he says, and I don't know much. But I want to know, I want to experience, actually in the previous verse. In the previous verse, he says, I do not know you, the Lord. I want to experience your powers, which I still don't know. You know everything. So that's the motivation. It's not such a common motivation. It's not as common as the motivation for wanting money from the Lord and therefore surrendering to the Lord. But it's a motivation to experience Lord's power. When somebody has this inspiration, I surrender to you because I want you to manifest all the powers which you have. I want to experience your presence. Like sometimes people believe in God, but they want God to manifest some miracle. My dear Lord, please do something, otherwise I will not be peaceful. Just manifest something miraculous. That may be the motivation. They come to the Lord and they say, please show me the extent of your power. And that's exactly what is going on in this 12th chapter of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Another wrong, not 100% correct attitude towards the Lord. Therefore, those people who really surrender, they don't need the Lord to manifest his powers. Those people who are not 100% surrender or not 100% selflessly surrender, they're dependent on the miracles of the Lord. But those people who are surrendered, they say that if Lord wants to show His power and His miracles, He will do it. If He doesn't want, He will not do it. I'm not dependent in my surrender unto Him upon His display of miraculous powers or mystical abilities. So that's the 12th chapter of the 8th canto. And of course, the main story starts now. The main story of the whole 8th canto is the story of Bali Maharaj. And the story of Bali Maharaj exemplifies or depicts very clearly, and therefore it's the most important story, the proper way to surrender to the Lord. As I said, Gajendra surrenders to the Lord because he is in need, because he suffers. Demigods surrender to the Lord because they need some wealth. And Lord Shiva surrenders to the Lord because he wants to see the power of the Lord. And it's interesting, actually, Lord Shiva, this whole story depicts humility, which is also a characteristic of surrender. Lord Shiva, after being embarrassed by the Lord, Mahini Murti is running and Lord Shiva is running after her, naked, overwhelmed with lusty desires, trying to embrace her. And before he said, no, I'm cool. Demigods were not lusty, and I'm so cool. And Mahini Murti said, let's see how cool you are. He was not so cool at the end of the day. But then he starts praying to the Lord, oh my dear Lord, you're so great, and I'm so small. And he's humiliated by the Lord, in one sense, but he's very grateful. He's full of gratitude for the Lord. That's the surrender. That's the glory of this whole story. But again, the main story of this 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is the story of surrender of Bali Maharaj, which is the proper surrender, the surrender proper, which is the causeless surrender, which is the surrender against all the benefits. Because Bali Maharaj, he was, he gave everything. He was deprived of everything. He was rejected by everyone, including his own soldiers, and still he was insistent on being surrendered. That's the main idea of this whole 8th canto, is to glorify the surrender of Bali Maharaj, how he was truthful to his word, how he was truthful to his surrender. Because we're all trying to surrender, right? We're trying to surrender, but sometimes we're not so consistent in our surrender. We are not really consistent to the letter of everything which we are doing. Sometimes, our mind is chanchala, our flickering mind. Sometimes we surrender, sometimes we not surrender, sometimes we surrender less, sometimes we surrender more. Sometimes we give the vow, sometimes we take the vow back. After all, I am the possessor of my vow. I want to give and I want to take it back, no problem. No, but the main teaching of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is that be like Bali Maharaj. Whatever happens with you, if you understand that the Lord is there and He is the only shelter, He will give everything to you. No problem. He gave everything to Bali Maharaj, including himself. He himself became the doorkeeper of Bali Maharaj, but not immediately. To glorify Bali Maharaj, he deprived him of everything. He humiliated Bali Maharaj just to show everyone how he is truly surrendered. And therefore, Bali Maharaj is the personification or the description of this atma-nikshepa, karpanye. He is the description of this very glorious element of surrender when one is completely surrendered to the Lord. Everything which he has, which he possesses, he gives to the Lord. So this whole story, it starts with demigods who are conditional and fruitive, deprived of their position in the heavenly planets, and Aditi, mother of demigods, she starts praying to the Lord with again the same sort of attitude. Give me, give to my sons back their kingdom, give this, give that. But because she follows very diligently the instructions of her husband, Kashyapa Muni gave her this whole prescription of Payavrata, and she follows everything, and she follows with the proper attitude. She gets what she wants. She gets Vamanadev. Lord himself incarnates as her son to come to her, being pleased by her surrender to Guru. The difference between her and demigods in the previous story. In the previous story, demigods, they go directly to the Supreme Lord. And therefore they get the instructions of the Supreme Lord, they get the benefits of surrendering to the Supreme Lord. But this story, when Aditi surrenders to Kashyapa Muni, shows that surrender to Guru is actually more important than surrender to the Supreme Lord. She surrenders to Guru and follows his instructions in a very proper way with a proper etiquette. It's actually the ideal family life is described in this chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Aditi and Kashyapa are conversing with each other, and Aditi is expressing in a very humble way her grievances. So if you surrender to Guru, you will get the Lord himself as a result. The Lord himself comes to you if this is genuine surrender to Guru and you follow very strictly your spiritual master. That's the teaching of Srimad Bhagavatam, of this section of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then, of course, Vamanadev appears. And it is said, it is explained that different avatars of the Lord, different incarnations of the Lord, they personify different qualities of the Lord. Like we know that the personality of Godhead has 6 main qualities. Aishvaryasya, Samagrasya, Viryasya, Yasya, Sakshriya, Jnana, Vairagya, Yos, Chaiva. The 6 qualities are there, starting with Aishvarya, Virya, Yasha, Shriya. So Vamanadev, according to this scheme, is the personification of Lord's beauty. In this 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there are 2 personifications of Lord's beauty. That's Mohini Murti and Vamanadev. And we have Shiva, his pastime with Mohini Murti. And we have Vamanadev, his pastime with of course, Bali Maharaj. And the first thing which is said here when Vamanadev comes to the sacrificial arena of Bali Maharaj, the first things which Bali Maharaj appreciates is his beauty. He sees his beauty and he surrenders not because of anything else, because of his beauty, because of his attraction. The proper way of surrender to the Lord, when we really start appreciating Lord's beauty, Lord's kindness, Lord's madhurya, Lord's sweetness, ultimately. That's the beginning of this story, and Bali Maharaj is so enamored by the Supreme Lord, by his beauty, by his charm. As a young brahmachari, he comes there and he speaks very witty words with Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj is surrendered. He is ready to give everything which he has. And he gives the three steps of land to Vamanadev. And of course, we know that Shukracharya says, don't do it. You will be cheated, don't do it. And Shukracharya, he quotes the Shastra. He says, Shastra says, don't surrender to the Lord. Shastra says that, you don't have to give everything, and he quotes all these Shastras, and Bali Maharaj looks at Shukracharya and says, I don't care what Shastra says. I only see this beautiful boy, and my heart is attracted to his beauty. And even if he is the Supreme Lord, it doesn't matter. It actually doesn't matter for me whether he is Supreme Lord or not, whether he gives me something in return or he doesn't give, or he will take everything from me. I told him that I will give him 3 steps of land, and I will give him the 3 steps of land, and he can do whatever he likes with me. And we all know that Vamanadev cheats Bali Maharaj in a very cruel way. Bali Maharaj says, and this little boy becomes very big. How come this little dwarf who was really small becomes really big? And he says, ha, 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 ha. And he covers the whole land with 1 step, and then the whole universe with another step, and asks, where is the 3rd step? Where shall I put the 3rd step? And Bali Maharaj says, put it here. And this is the moment of surrender. And the Lord himself says, you are a cheater. Bali Maharaj, who is the most truthful person, and the Lord himself is the cheater. And the Lord himself tells him, you're a cheater. Does it sound familiar to you? all the time like this, You're being accused of something which somebody else who is accusing you is doing to you. So he's trying to humiliate. He's testing Bali Maharaj in a very heavy way. He's telling Garuda just bind him, and Garuda is binding him, and he's brought in front of the Lord as an animal. You cheater. You didn't fulfill your desire. Only because he wants to glorify Bali Maharaj. Surrender is not a cheap process. This is actually what this whole story shows. Surrender is a glorious process. And the Lord doesn't expect from us the complete surrender from the very beginning, but he also shows that if somebody is completely surrendered, then the Lord gives to him everything at the end. But in between, he may go through different problems. Like Pandavas, they were very surrendered. But they went through difficult problems. Why? Because the Lord uses these people, the surrendered people, to teach other people. To teach how to take difficulties, how to undergo all these difficulties and remain faithful and grateful to the Lord. Basically, that's the main important lesson. Surrender means, the difficulties will come to us. They're inevitable. That's the nature of this world. We will suffer. There will be some difficulties with us, but we should be steady in our attempt to surrender to the Lord. My Lord, I am yours. And then the Lord will save us, no doubt about it. Internally, he will give us protection. And therefore, he glorifies Bali Maharaj. At the end, the Lord himself starts glorifying Bali Maharaj. He says, look at Bali Maharaj. Other people, when they get riches, wealth, when they get high births, when they get other such opulences, although aristocratic births and other such opulence, impediments to advancement in devotional service, because they are causes of false prestige and pride, these opulences never disturb a pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He before says that, if somebody has aristocratic family or higher status of life, if he performs wonderful activities, if he is useful, if he has personal duty, a good education, a good wealth, if he is nonetheless not proud of his opulences, it is to be understood that he is especially favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, Vamanadev is teaching us which person can be surrendered. Why Bali Maharaj surrendered? Why Bali Maharaj was able to surrender to the Supreme Lord? Because he got blessings of Prahlad Maharaj. And blessings of Prahlad Maharaj, sometimes when it comes to blessings, what do you really mean by blessings? You come to somebody and says, give me blessings. What is your conception of blessings? Usually people think, what is blessing? Blessing is material wealth, good family life, nice children, good marks in my exams. So, this is what people think, what is blessings. But here, the most important teaching of this section of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is that the real blessings of a saint is humility. That you may get everything, or you may not get everything, but you remain humble. This ability to remain humble is the most important quality. Whether you get high position, whether you get wealth or not, if you remain humble, it means that the mercy of devotees is upon you. And if you get something and you become proud and you start offending others, then it means that you don't have any blessings. No Ashirvad was given to you. Real Ashirvad is this ability to remain humble in any position of life. That's what we need to seek. When we come to a devotee and we ask for a blessing, we should ask for this blessing. Please help me to remain humble. Please share your humility with me. This is what I need. Everything else will come automatically. The Lord will give to you if you are trusted. Srila Prabhupada, he was humble all the time. He showed this constancy in humility. And that means that he got blessings of his Guru Maharaj and of the whole Guru Parampara. This is what blessings really is, what it's all about. And actually this whole surrendering process, the pure surrendering process is only possible for humble people. Only humble people will be able to undergo through this surrendering process and achieve the result of this surrendering process. If you're proud, it will be very difficult to do the real surrender, the sincere surrender. It will be something fake, not exactly what is it. And therefore, the Lord himself glorifies Bali Maharaj. Although bereft of his riches, fallen from his original position, defeated and arrested by his enemies, rebuked and deserted by his relatives and friends, Bali Maharaj was attacked by his own demons, by his own generals. He was betrayed by them. Although suffering the pain of being bound and although rebuked and cursed by his spiritual master, Bali Maharaj, being fixed in his vow, did not give up his truthfulness. It was certainly with pretension that I spoke about religious principles, but he did not give up religious principles, for he is true to his word. So this is, as the Lord himself says, this is the real Dharma. As we said, the whole 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is the description of Sad-dharma. This Sad-dharma is described in this 29th and 30th verses of the 22nd chapter of 8th canto, where the Lord himself says that in any condition of life, you remain surrendered. If you remain surrendered, servant of the Lord, despite of all the reverses, despite of all the difficulties which you undergo, this is the real Dharma. And you remain truthful to this real Dharma, suvrata, satyam. So then only your surrender is true, is real. And therefore, this surrender is glorified by the Lord himself. And the Lord himself says, I become his possession. I become his doorkeeper. I give him all the opulences. I'll make him Indra next time. I'll make him the king of the heavenly planets. I'll give him the opulences of Patala world. And I become his constant companion. Because of his qualities, because of his sincere surrender. So that's the manifestation of pure surrender without any motivation. Bali Maharaj was deprived of everything, still he was surrendered. That's the difficult lesson of the 8th canto. And we only have one more chapter of the 8th canto, which is the story of... one more very important verse which I wanted to show to you before we come to the next section of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the verse which is spoken by Prahlad Maharaj. Very interesting and very important verse. Chitram tavehitam aho mita yoga maya. Aho mita yoga maya. It's the 8th verse of the 23rd chapter of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Prahlad Maharaj glorifies the Supreme Lord, who dealt quite roughly with his descendant, his grandson, Bali Maharaj. He says that he compares the Lord with Kalpataru Svabhavaha, Bhakta Priyo Yadasi Kalpataru Svabhavaha. Prahlad Maharaj says, O my Lord, your pastimes are all wonderfully performed by your inconceivable spiritual energy, and by her perverted reflections, the material energy, you have created all the universes as the super soul of all living entities. You are aware of everything, and therefore you are certainly equal towards everyone. Nonetheless, you favor your devotees. This is not partiality, however, for your characteristic is just like that of desire tree, which yields everything according to one's desire. So that's very important, also crucial verse for this understanding of the 8th canto, because it shows why the Lord is supposedly partial to those who surrender to him. Because he's like Kalpataru. Kalpataru, desire tree, will give you everything only if you come to Kalpataru, take shelter of Kalpataru, and ask something from Kalpataru. Then the Kalpataru will give. Demons don't get because they don't go to Kalpataru. The Lord is impartial. He equally distributes goods to devotees and to the demons, but he has this nature of Kalpataru. Therefore, if you come to him, if you surrender to him, if you ask him the favor, being completely surrendered, he will fulfill your desires. And he will remain impartial. And if you don't come, he will not fulfill your desires. It doesn't mean that he is partial. It just depends on you. We have to surrender. We have to come to him. We have to ask him something. And this is the whole verse, the important verse which Srila Jiva Goswami takes in Bhakti Sandarbha, in Paramatma Sandarbha to explain the impartiality of the Lord. Very important verse, how it works, why the Lord remains impartial even though he only reciprocates with the surrendered people. Because that's his nature, that's what it is. He is like the desire tree, and you should ask the desire tree and take shelter of desire tree. Anyway, so that's, we already covered 6 elements of surrender. The first 2 elements, anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam. Manu Maharaj is explaining, Gajendra, the elephant, he is explaining how to seek the protection of the Lord, or be sure in the protection of the Lord. Then demigods and Aditi, they're explaining how to be sure that the Lord will fulfill all your desires and will maintain you. And then Shiva is very humble, being humiliated by the Lord. And of course, Bali Maharaj is very humble, and he is the personification of Atmanikshepa, of complete surrender, including his own head. So that's all being described, and we described 4 motivations so far. The motivation to surrender because we are suffering, the motivation because we need some money, inquisitiveness, and the pure motivation. There is only one remaining topic. The motivation to surrender because we want knowledge of the Lord. Because we really jnani, we want knowledge. And that is depicted in the last chapter of this 8th canto, in the story of Satyavrata Muni and Matsya Avatar. It is very interestingly again described there that Satyavrata Muni, O Supreme Lord, for self-realization I surrender unto you, who are worshipped by the demigods as the supreme controller of everything. By your instructions, exposing life's purpose, kindly cut the knot from the core of my heart and let me know the destination of my life. This is very clear description of this motivation to surrender for the sake of knowledge. Please reveal to me who I am. Please reveal to me what is my spiritual nature. That's what I want, and therefore I surrender to you. This whole story about Matsya Avatar and Satyavrata Muni is about this. Therefore, in the previous verse, he calls Matsya Avatar as our guru, our spiritual master. His relationship with Matsya Avatar is the relationship of disciple and the spiritual master. Therefore, that's the 4th motivation from this verse of Bhagavad Gita. Arto jigyasarartati jnani cha bharatar shabam. And in the next verse, 47th verse, he calls him Nah Guru, our Guru. In the 48th verse, he says, Guror Guru. He is the Guru of the Gurus. The Lord is the Guru of the Gurus. And because he is the Guru of the Gurus, please reveal to me my spiritual nature. Please reveal to me the spiritual truths. That's the 53rd verse, the last verse of his prayers, Satyavrata Muni prayers. So that's the last story of the 8th canto, which shows the surrender because of this desire to get knowledge by Satyavrata Muni. So that's basically the short description, very cursory description of what 8th canto is about. It's the complete science of surrender. And if you want to surrender, to know what it means to surrender, how to surrender. And of course, there is a side topic which is also there, that if your surrender is not proper, then you will make the offenses. And that's explained in the story of Indradyumna Maharaj, how Indradyumna Maharaj offended Agastya Muni. Of course, there was no pride, but still, it is actually described that in this particular story, it is described that why we are suffering in this world. We are suffering in this world because of our previous offenses. And actually, Jiva Goswami, he takes the example of Gajendra, the elephant, as the story of Gajendra the elephant, as the story or as an example which shows what happens when we commit offenses while chanting the holy name. He says, one of the results of the offensive chanting of the holy name is that we become very dull and slack in our sadhana. If we offensively commit our sadhana, the sadhana becomes it's not very exciting for us. So, and he says, this is exactly what happened with Indradyumna Maharaj. He was a devotee, he committed an offense, he became a dull elephant. And it required for him to suffer for some time to come back to senses and to understand that he has to surrender. So this is what happens if we offend while the devotees, while performing our sadhana, then we lose interest towards sadhana. And we become dull, and we become less sensitive, and therefore, to wake us up, the sufferings will come. So that's another important lesson. And of course, demigods, they were deprived of their possessions because of the offense of Brihaspati, who was offended by Guru, by Indra. So that's a side effect, how this wrong desires in the process of surrender to the Lord comes due to the offenses. So it's important to understand that, my natural position is to be surrendered to the Lord. And I have to do it because that's my nature, because the Lord is so nice and so beautiful and so attractive, like Bali Maharaj did it. And for that, to do this, we need blessings of the pure devotees, like Prahlad Maharaj in case of Bali. So that's in gist, the description of the message of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So next will be the 9th canto. Sorry for such a long class. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Thank you very much for yet another very in-depth. Though today it is a structural overview, but actually it takes us quite deep into the elements and key characteristics of these cantos. And as you rightly encapsulated, Canto 8 is the science of surrender. There have been many quotable quotes that came through in today's session, but the one that stood out was the real blessing of a saint is humility. And the second was the part that why difficulties come to the fully surrendered souls is because they take those difficulties, live through it in humility to teach the ones who are not yet surrendered. So, on that note, there are many more points that we can discuss, but due to the paucity of time, we won't be able to. So my question to you, Guru Maharaj, is can we take one or two questions at least?
Yes, sure.
So there is one question already from Anupama Radharani Mataji, and the question is as follows. Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my respectful obeisances. Thank you for the enlightening lecture. The demigods are known to be mixed bhaktas. When they approach Lord Vishnu for protection against the demons, they do so out of fear. Is there not a component of their duties in their respective positions being hampered by the demons, those duties which have been designated to them ultimately by the Supreme Lord Himself. How should or with what mentality should practicing devotees approach the Lord for relief in the hurdles in executing their duties to the Lord?
If this is the only motivation, our motivation, oh my dear Lord, please relieve me from all these difficulties so that I can execute my duties better, then it's fine. But oftentimes it's not the primary factor that may execute my duties properly. We have some other factors when we offer these prayers to the Lord. And therefore, basically, it means if we take something home from this lesson is that we should be very conscientious what is our motivation to serve the Lord. And the primary motivation should be, I'm the servant of the Lord anyway. And the Lord is so nice. He has already given me so many things. So yes, this motivation is certainly there in demigods' prayers because they are devotees. But because they are mixed devotees, there's also another motivation. Yes, we want to serve, but we only want to serve in the heavenly planets. Please don't send us to hellish planets to serve to you because we are demigods. So, whereas for the devotee, as we have seen in case of Chitraketu Maharaj, as Lord Shiva himself glorifies him, for devotee, it doesn't matter. He says, you can send me to hell, you can send me to heaven, I will anyway serve you. And this is exactly what Prabhupada said. He said that devotee is like a cow. Cow, it doesn't matter what the cow is, she gives milk. Whether she is on earth, whether she is in the moon, if you send the cow to the moon, the cow will give milk in the moon. So that's what real surrender is. But if we say, I will serve you, my dear Lord, but only if you make me the temple president, or GBC or sannyasi or whatever, or Guru Maharaj. So if this is your prayer, then it may not be the best type of surrender. I have a little friend, a little boy, and he was very little boy. Somebody asked him, whom do you want to be? Because usually adult people, they ask this question of small children, what do you want to be? And he looked around and he said, I want to be Guru Maharaj. This is my career path. It's very surrendered. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj. So we have 2 more questions. I don't know whether we can take both.
Okay.
We have time?
Yes.
Okay. This is a question from Arun. By working hard, he's referring to what you said in your session. You mentioned that if we work very hard, then Lord will fulfill whatever desires we have. So on that, the question is, by working hard, can we achieve what is not there in our destiny?
If I surrender to the Lord, yes. Because the Lord he's complete. We are incomplete. We are limited by our destiny, but we can achieve incredible results, which are not within our destiny if we surrender to the Lord, because the Lord uses us as His instrument, and for Him it doesn't matter whether it is our destiny or not our destiny. He has His own destiny, so and for Him there's nothing impossible. So He can do. It's possible. It's quite possible. If we're completely surrendered, the Lord will do impossible things through us. And we will be wondering, how is it possible? But through the process of surrender it is.
Thank you. The last question. This is from Mohana Kumar, how we should behave when we are working or dealing with outsiders, because when we are humble or surrendered, or when we have a humble and surrendered mentality, then there is a chance that they put false allegations on us or they cheat us. What or how to react in such situation?
Yeah, there is this story about the snake which became the servant of Narada Muni, and the snake became really bitten by other people because he was very humble. And Narada Muni met his disciple and asked, what happened to you? You were robust and very healthy snake, and you became a very downtrodden creature. How did it happen? He said, because I'm a devotee, I'm supposed to be humble. And Narada Muni said, no. You can show your hood. You don't have to buy it, but you can show your hood. So, and therefore, Srila Prabhupada was teaching the same. One of his lady book distributors came and she said, Prabhupada, how can I distribute book if I'm humble? I cannot. I will not be able to distribute even one book if I'm humble. I have to be really, proud and outgoing to deal with the outside people. And Prabhupada said, while distributing books, you should be like a lion. But while coming back in the temple, you should be like a lamb. So dealing with other people, you should be a lamb in a lion's skin. Internally, you should be a lamb, but externally, you put lion's skin and say, ah! But internally, we're surrendered souls, but for the sake, and Prabhupada, sometimes he would show, externally he would be very proud, but internally he was always a surrendered soul, very humble. But some foolish people, by looking at him, superficially may conclude that, he's so proud. No, but he was the servant. His consciousness was very humble. So it's a question of having proper internal attitude. How it will manifest externally, it should be according to the time, place, and circumstances. Okay.
Thank you. There is one request from Gaurav Prabhu, who is requesting, if possible, can one question be taken, though this was the last one from my side.
Yes, sir.
So, okay, this is really the last one, because we'll have a few little announcements after that. The question comes from Gaurav Prabhu. Why we are not surrendering to Lord is because of fear. Example, Kunti Maharani, even Prabhupada, etc. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur says that those who are favored by Lord, their path is smeared with thorns. That's why we are not surrendering. What's your thoughts on this, Maharaj?
as far as I know, everyone's path is sprinkled by thorns. I haven't seen anyone who is only walking on the carpet. Usually everyone has thorns, but if you surrendered, you can overcome all these thorns. You will not even notice all these thorns because you're surrendered. Thorns are there in everyone's life, Does anyone doesn't have any thorns, whether he's surrendered or not surrendered? It doesn't matter. Everyone has difficulties, but the internal surrender helps us to undergo these difficulties properly. And moreover, like if you're not surrendered, you undergo all these difficulties. At the end result is that you become really miserable, and you get so much, negative emotions accumulated within your heart, and you become an old, unsurrendered, and quite cranky, man who is not happy with life. And if you surrender, if you're grateful at heart, then you take all these lessons, and these lessons becomes your qualities, and you go through these lessons in a less miserable way. Pandavas, yes, they had difficult life, but at the same time, they were blissful. People, they only, when they see the sufferings, when they see the events of the life of the devotees, they only see external things. They don't understand what's going on internally. When we are looking at the lives of other people, we should not only see the external events which are there, but what one is experiencing while going through these things. For us to go through the same events or through the same calamities would be very difficult. For them, it was not difficult. For them, as Kunti Maharani herself says, every time when we would experience difficulties, we would also experience your presence, and it would give us so much, and therefore send these difficulties again and again to us. So, but of course, we don't have to ask for this. No need. The Lord Himself better knows what we need. But it doesn't matter whether one is surrendered or not. Surrender is not. By surrendering, we are not asking for more troubles. By surrendering, we are actually getting the relief from the calamities which we will anyway experience in our life.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Guru Maharaj. On that note,
I have some other questions from the audience.
Oh, please, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you Maharaj for taking this question. My question was I wanted to get more light on the character of Bali Maharaj. Because before surrendering, we see him fighting with Indra, fighting with demigods, and taking the position and conquering all the worlds, and following Shukracharya. But suddenly there is a change in his personality. He surrenders to the Lord at the crucial moment. Did he become a devotee? Was he always a devotee?
No, he was a devotee. There are certain indications of this. The question is about Bali Maharaj. Was he always a devotee, even though he was behaving like a demon, fighting with Indra, etc., etc.? No, he was a devotee always. He had this devotional attitude all the time. It's an interesting methodology of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam wants to show to us that devotion does not really depend on the external things. Like Vritrasura was a demon, but he was Mahabhagavata devotee. And Bali Maharaj also, externally he was behaving as a demon, fulfilling his duty. But there are certain indications even there in the previous events of his life, and he was already a devotee. He was a devotee. due to the blessings of Prahlad Maharaj. This powerful, but see, the blessings works like this. Why it is described in such a way in Srimad Bhagavatam? The blessings is a seed. When you meet a pure devotee, you get a seed. And it takes some time when the seed will sprout and then ultimately will grow into a tree. So this is what it is. Like when somebody for the first time met with Srila Prabhupada, it's not necessarily that immediately he would surrender or whatever. It will take some time. The seed is there, the impression is there, but it takes some time for the impression to grow up. So what happens with Bali Maharaj, when Prahlad Maharaj blessed Bali Maharaj, for some time this seed was dormant there and it didn't manifest. But then actually being pleased with Prahlad Maharaj, Vamanadev decided to come to Bali Maharaj. And because Vamanadev knew that Bali Maharaj was blessed by Prahlad Maharaj, therefore he came. And, at that moment, the whole seed which was there, dormant, sprouted. But even before that, it was already kind of growing. But then, when the result of these blessings came in the form of Vamanadev, Bali Maharaj manifested his real nature as a devotee, as opposed to other people who also saw Vamanadev, but were not attracted or didn't undergo the change of the heart. Because this is the powerful effect, but the effect of the blessings may not be immediate, may not be instant. Usually it's not instant. Okay, it's over. Okay.
Maharaj, could you tell us what the question was previously?
The question was that about the character of Bali Maharaj. He was demon and he was fighting with Indra and this and that, and all of a sudden he became a devotee. How come it is? Was he a devotee before, or did it, immediately, instantly manifested? How was it?
So we can say that
Thank you.
He had a seed of devotion. In that sense, he was a...
Yeah, he had a seed of devotion. It may not manifest to the fullest extent, but the seed of devotion is eternal. If you get the seed of devotion, if you get the blessings of the pure devotee, it will be there with you. Sooner or later, it will manifest. No doubt about it.
So at this point, he became a pure devotee.
Yeah, at this point, it becomes obvious. Because he felt attraction. Others didn't feel attraction to Vamanadev. He sees the beauty personified standing in front of him and he is totally enamored. Others were not impressed. They were trying to fight.
Maharaj, as a sadhaka, as we are practicing this sadhana bhakti, in our law, what exactly means this aspect of surrender, or how we can examine our life, ourselves, that am I surrendered, or sometimes it may happen that externally we may be speaking humbly and we may act as if I am surrendered, but internally we may be revolting or we may not yet surrender. So what exactly surrender means and how we can see our own?
You can be sure that the extent of your external surrender is more than the extent of your internal surrender. That this much you can be sure. But it's a dynamic process. We are constantly reminded by Srimad Bhagavatam, by the devotees, by the authorities that we should surrender. It may be a struggle, internal struggle, but how we can check ourselves, examine ourselves whether we're surrendered or not. There are the 6 lakshanas, how strictly we follow everything which is necessary, anukulyasya sankalpa, how strictly we are rejecting everything which is not good or not favorable. And we see that there are some deficiencies. They're not really as fixed up as we should be, and how firmly we believe that the Lord will give us protection, and how firmly we believe that the Lord is maintaining us, how humble we are. Basically, the most obvious characteristic, which easily checkable by outsiders and by ourselves also, is the extent of our internal humility, how humble we are. And humility, how we check the level of our humility is how we take the difficult situation. If we take the difficult situation with the gratitude in the heart, that's humility. Actually, gratitude is the main manifestation of humility. If we're grateful, we're humble. If we're not grateful, we're proud. Okay, thank you very much. I guess that's it. It was quite long.
So we also want to thank His Grace Narahari Chaitanya Prabhu for really not only hosting Maharaj in Bangalore, but also hosting these sessions, and particularly today's session, and to all the assembled devotees there, our humble pranams to everyone. And thank you to all the devotees who joined in today. We had more than close to 66 devotees in attendance. Stay connected. We have sent you the links of School of Vedic Studies. Please register yourself there so that you can get the notifications for all our future sessions, particularly with Maharaj. Hopefully in the next 2 weeks you will hear from us for the next session on the 9th canto. So on that note, we are deeply honored, fortunate to have Maharaj amongst us, and we thank him from the bottom of our hearts for giving yet another wonderful session on the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. His Holiness Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Guru Maharaj ki
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.